Hello there, I'm John Stofflet with UWEBC as we continue our series previewing our fantastic speakers coming up at our annual conference on October 1st. And Carol Ptak is going to be speaking about supply chain on that track, and she is a world-renowned expert in this area. She's a partner at Demand Driven Institute. And I'll tell you what, it is going to be great to have you there because for people like me who aren't experts on supply chain, just an average Joe, I certainly heard so much about it, Carol, during the pandemic. I think that's when, for most of us, we kind of found out, oh, the supply chain. So I'll talk about the effect of the pandemic on supply chains. But first, sort of a rudimentary thing for those in other areas of the business world. What exactly do you do in supply chain management?
Well, and that's really the benefit, John, of the pandemic is before when people would say, well, what do you do for a living? And I said, well, I have a think tank about a different methodology for supply chain management. And I would get the look of, and what would be supply chain management?
Uh-huh.
And then you had to go through and explain supply chain. So people quickly understood what supply chains were as the pandemic rolled out. I landed from Colombia. I was in actually Bogota when the United States started to shut down, and I landed in Houston. And I looked around, and there was nobody there. And I thought, what just happened? And they said, well, Colombia just closed her borders, and had I not been on that midnight flight, I would have been stuck in Colombia for 7 weeks. So it was a dramatic shift. And what supply chain does is how do we get goods and services from customers back to suppliers. So what happened was when you have that kind of a disruptive change on the customer side, the suppliers are scrambling. Now, where the pandemic added a little more difficulty is the fact that the suppliers were also disrupted because their suppliers were disrupted. All of a sudden, country borders are closed. I got out of Colombia with 15 minutes to spare. So we're trying to handle major disruptions at the same time that our customers are giving us an additional major disruption. I mean, the whole joke here in the United States is you couldn't get toilet paper.
Yeah.
You couldn't get anything. I live on a cattle ranch in Arizona, and usually for us, we go into town for supplies once a week. And it became a daily thing of I'd send my hubby to town with a shopping list and say, see what you can get today. Now innovative product offerings and service offerings came out of that. Like I downloaded an app that said, okay, I got this and this and this in the house. What can I make for dinner?
Mm-hmm.
A reverse app. Instead of saying, this is what I want to make, this is what I got to go get. So supply chain, and we saw all the challenges with supply chain during pandemic of not being able to get goods moved. I mean, you look at the debacle that happened in California, because the California policy was the drivers couldn't go in unless they had the jab. They had to have trucks that had certain emissions. And we watched container ships just backing up at the port, couldn't get them through. So they went through the Panama Canal. Well, that wasn't the logistics that were set for those goods. And so we watched this whole debacle just roll out during the pandemic because that was a very sudden shift. Now, normal supply chains experience a great deal of variability and volatility, and that's the world we have to live in today. We spent a lot of time talking to executives, and they said, well, when we get back to normal, you go, this is the new normal. So supply chains are variable, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and that's the world we have to live in.
And you're an expert on the bullwhip effect that can happen in supply chains. And so how does demand driven, what the methodology behind that, for those who may not be familiar, explain the concept?
Well, anybody that's been on an airplane understands the bullwhip effect, and they are also experts. Because if you have a choice of doing 2 or 3 connections to get someplace, or you can take a direct flight. I am so looking forward to coming up for the conference on October 1st, and I had 2 choices of flights. I could fly direct and then drive for an hour and a half, or I could take a connection. Well, given what I know about bullwhip, I took the direct flight and I'll drive because the safety there is better. So demand driven does really the same kind of thing where it says, how do I buffer? How do I create a firewall so that variability doesn't build up? I was just recently in Eugene, Oregon, and my flight back to Phoenix on American Airlines was delayed an hour and a half. Well, I'm on an airplane with a whole lot of stressed people because American hubs out of Phoenix. There's a lot of connecting flights. I was comfortable because I knew once that plane took off, I stood a pretty good chance of getting back to Phoenix. but those other people had connections. So how do we create that firewall so that it absorbs variability? But the key is like a firewall, it absorbs variability from both sides. And so that's really the first secret, if you will, of demand driven, is how do we design supply chains so that we have these firewalls so that the supply chain becomes more resilient.
Hmm. Yeah, and you actually have the Ptak Prize is named after you. This is a life's passion for you. You spent a career in it. So I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. One is the second question is about encouraging younger people thinking about this as a career. But for you first, what is it you enjoy about your job and the impact it has?
Well, that's an interesting question because a lot of people look at me at my age and say, "When are you going to retire?" And I had the great honor of writing a book with Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt, the gentleman that wrote the book The Goal. And Ellie's attitude always was, retirement is only doing that which you really want to do. So what I tell people is I'm actually retired because I have great passion for what I do. I see the impact that we now have in supply chains, that we have a methodology that was specifically designed for supply chains. Because when we name supply chains, and I say we because I was part of that group, we really thought of supply chains as customer's customer to supplier supplier, and it was a chain. The problem is the supply chains have never been chains. Supply chains are complex adaptive systems, which means they can never be optimized, and all the APS and APOs in the world are never going to be effective. So finally, we have a methodology that understands that supply chains are complex adaptive systems that leverage the new technologies that we have in machine learning and artificial intelligence, which are also based on complex adaptive systems. And we have the educational courses and we have the consultants worldwide that can apply this for companies with tremendous, almost unbelievable results. And it's an exciting time to be part of supply chain. So why would I do anything other than what I absolutely love to do, which is supply chain?
Yeah, your passion is evident, and I think as somebody who recently retired and still loved what I was doing, but it was more the working till 11 o'clock at night doing the news that got hard. But there is a prize for young supply chain professionals, and for someone who might be thinking of a business oriented field. What would you sell them on as far as pursuing supply chain and supply chain management?
I would say find an industry that you have great passion for. My background, I came out of medical devices and pharmaceuticals, and then I went into aerospace. And it was very interesting to me how some of that transferred and some of it didn't, because I'd sit in meetings in aerospace and go, "What do you mean we can't go from 12 to 15 a month? It's only three more." Well, when you start to talk about airplanes, it's a big change. When you look at medical devices and you're doing 15,000 a month and you go to 18,000, it's not a big deal. But it's pick an industry that you have a passion for, something that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And supply chain is just such an exciting part of that business, because what I used to teach my students when I was teaching at Pacific Lutheran University for several years is the only source of competitive advantage that any company has is to exploit their unique operational capability that provides value to the customer at a profit to themselves. That's it. Everything else is short term. So if we want to have long-term strategic success, it's figuring out what is that unique operational capability and how do you drive value in the marketplace. Understanding that you're living in a VUCA world, you've got to deal with variability, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the rules and tools that were developed in the 50s, codified in the 60s, and commercialized in the 70s didn't work real well back then, but we got away with it because the world just was not moving as quickly as it is today. And it most certainly is not a good fit today.
Mm-hmm. Well, talking about adaptation, your talk on October 1st is adaptive sales and operations planning. So, what is it you hope that those who attend your talk October 1st at the UWEBC conference, what is it you hope they get out of the presentation?
What I really hope they get is the fact that when Dick Ling first brought up the idea of sales and operations planning in the 1980s, he was 1988, a lot of people believe that was Ollie White. Ollie never heard the term. Ollie unfortunately passed at a very young age. And so it was Dick Ling that actually brought that concept to life and dedicated his whole life to sales and operations planning. And his vision was always that S&OP was management's handle on the business. Unfortunately, it has been deteriorated and hijacked to mean supply demand balancing. And that was never Dick's intent. So we were very thrilled to have Dick write the Adaptive S&OP book with us. He is the lead author on that book. I had the honor of traveling with Dick for about 12 years. So I sort of channeled Dick Ling. And what I'm really hoping people realize is that there is an opportunity now for S&OP to regain and restore its promise to industry of being management's handle on the business. Because every business basically in this VUCA world has two choices. You either learn how to adapt or you die. And it's really as simple as that.
And VUCA, I had to look it up because I'm not the expert. She is. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, as she mentioned. So that's the VUCA she refers to. And certainly if you're in the supply chain world, you know that term and perhaps know it very well. And Carol is, as you can see, someone who's very passionate about what she does, has an interesting message that you'll be able to hear out there on October 1st. To go to the UWEBC website to find out how to register. And Carol, I look forward to seeing you on October 1st, and I wish you safe travels in the meantime. We didn't get a chance this time to talk about your Highland beef cattle, but you also do that on the side. I'm not sure when you have time to just relax, but hopefully you're finding time to do that as well.
Well, actually, that's only my second business. I actually have a third business that I'm actually an owner of a rocket materials company, so we can chat about that too. And we actually do firefighting okay, as well as a lot of other interesting things. So yeah, you can never be too old to learn new tricks. So we look forward to seeing you.
And you're going to learn new tricks from Carol Ptak on October 1st. We'll see you then here in Madison. Carol, thank you so much for carving out time for us during your busy travels.
Look forward to it. And on my direct flight.